You've started looking at charts differently, and you didn't notice it happening. The 15-minute candles that used to feel urgent now feel like noise. You open the 4-hour chart first without thinking about it. You scroll past the 1-minute setups you used to chase. This wasn't a decision, it just happened. And now you're wondering if something is wrong with you because trading feels less exciting than it did 6 months ago. You used to feel something when you opened your platform. Anticipation. A little jolt. The sense that something could happen today. Now you open it and feel nothing. You check your positions, you look at the charts, you close the platform, the whole thing takes 3 minutes. You're not bored exactly, you're not frustrated, you're just not feeling what you used to feel. And that absence makes you wonder if you've lost something important. Other people are still posting screenshots of quick wins. They're celebrating 50-pip moves that took 20 minutes. They're talking about catching the London Open or riding momentum during New York. You see those posts and you don't feel envy. You don't feel competitive. You feel something closer to mild confusion. Like watching someone get excited about a game you used to play but don't recognize anymore. You're not judging them. You're just not in that world anymore. And you didn't consciously leave it. You've stopped checking your trades during the day. Not because you decided to be disciplined, because there's nothing to check. Your stop is placed, your target is placed. The trade either works or it doesn't, and watching it won't change that. You used to believe that watching helped. That somehow your attention influenced the outcome. You don't believe that anymore, but you can't remember when you stopped believing it. The shift was so gradual that it feels like you've always known this even though you definitely haven't. You're taking fewer trades. You didn't set a rule about this. You didn't write in your journal that you would be more selective. You just started seeing setups that used to look good, and now they look incomplete. Like someone showed you the finished version of a painting, and now you can see that the earlier drafts were missing something essential. You can't unsee it. And because you're taking fewer trades, the weeks feel emptier. You're starting to wonder if you're overthinking things, if you've become too cautious. If this selectiveness is actually just another form of fear. The charts you're watching now take longer to develop. A setup you would have entered in an afternoon now takes 3 days to form. You watch it build slowly. You see the structure take shape across sessions. You wait for the confirmation that used to feel unnecessary. And when you finally enter the trade, it doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like the only logical response to what the chart has already shown you. But because the whole process is slower, you're completing fewer trades per month. Your account isn't growing faster, it's growing steadier. And steady doesn't feel like progress when you're used to measuring progress by activity. You've started noticing how much energy you used to spend on trading. Not physical energy, mental energy, the constant scanning, the pattern recognition running in the background of every conversation, the compulsion to check the markets during meals or while watching something. You didn't realize how loud it all was until it got quieter. Now you have hours in your day that used to be filled with chart time, and those hours feel strange. You're not sure what to do with them. You're not sure if this emptiness means you're losing interest, or if this is what normal interest actually looks like. You used to trade because it made you feel something. The risk, the possibility, the sense that you were participating in something real and immediate. Now you trade because the setup is there. That's it. The emotional component has faded so much that you sometimes wonder if you're doing it wrong. If real traders are supposed to feel more than this. If the absence of adrenaline means you've become complacent, or detached, or mechanical in a way that will eventually hurt you. The people who started when you did are mostly gone now. Not all of them, but most. They stopped posting. Their accounts went quiet. You don't know if they blew up or just lost interest or found something else. You think about them sometimes. You wonder if they felt this same flatness before they left. If they interpreted the quiet as failure, if they quit right before something shifted, you can't ask them because they're not around anymore. And you're starting to understand that the ones who leave don't announce it. They just fade. You've stopped trying to predict where price will go. You used to have strong opinions about direction. You'd look at a chart and feel certain that it was going up or down. You'd construct narratives about why the market would do what you expected. Now, you look at a chart and you see possibilities. If price does this, then you'll do that. If it does something else, you'll do something else. The certainty is gone. You're not waiting for the market to confirm your prediction. You're waiting for the market to tell you what it's doing so you can respond. This feels passive. It feels like you're not really trading anymore, like you're just reacting. Your old trades look different when you review them. The ones you thought were good setups now look forced. You can see yourself pushing into positions because you wanted to trade, not because the trade was there. You can see the impatience, the need to be involved, the assumption that action equals progress. You don't feel embarrassed looking at these trades. You feel distant from them. Like they were made by a different person who had different priorities. And that distance makes you wonder who you are now if you're not that person anymore. You've started to notice how much permission you used to need. Permission to enter a trade. Permission to sit out. Permission to take profit early or let it run. You were always checking your approach against what other people said was correct. Now you make decisions, and you don't think about whether they're the right decisions. You think about whether they're consistent with what you saw on the chart. The external validation has become irrelevant without you deciding to make it irrelevant. And this independence feels less like confidence and more like isolation. The winning trades don't feel like wins anymore. You hit your target, and you feel nothing. No excitement, no relief, just a neutral observation that the trade worked. The losing trades don't feel like losses either. You get stopped out, and you close the platform, and you move on. You used to replay your losses for hours, analyzing what went wrong, trying to figure out how you missed the signals. Now you just accept that the trade didn't work. And that's information, but it's not a story. This emotional flatness should feel like growth, but it doesn't. It feels like you've lost your connection to the thing you're doing. You're looking at monthly charts now, not every day, but regularly. You're seeing patterns that take years to complete. You're recognizing that the move you're trying to catch is part of a structure that started long before you were aware of it, and will continue long after you exit. This perspective should make you feel small, but it doesn't. It makes everything else feel small. The daily fluctuations, the news events, the excitement over 50-pip moves. When you zoom out far enough, all of that disappears into noise. And once you've seen it disappear, you can't pretend it matters the way it used to. You're starting to realize that most of what you thought was trading was actually waiting for something to feel like trading. You were looking for the emotional hit, the confirmation that you were doing something important and difficult and real. You were measuring your involvement by how much it affected you. Now it doesn't affect you the same way, and you're left with the actual mechanics. The waiting, the pattern recognition, the execution, the management. It's simpler than you thought it would be. And that simplicity feels wrong because you were taught that trading is complex and demanding and psychologically brutal, but your experience now is that it's mostly boring. Your relationship with risk has changed without you noticing. You used to think about risk in terms of how much you could lose on a single trade. Now you think about risk in terms of whether you're positioned correctly for what the chart is showing. The money still matters, but it's secondary to the logic of the trade. You're not trying to avoid losses. You're trying to avoid trades that don't make sense. And when a trade makes sense, the risk feels irrelevant, because the risk is just part of the structure. You can't have the trade without the risk. They're the same thing. You've stopped looking for confirmation from other traders. You used to check what other people were seeing. Compare your analysis to theirs. Feel better when someone else saw what you saw. Now you look at a chart and you form your read. And you don't need anyone to agree with it. Not because you're confident, because their agreement doesn't change anything. If the trade works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Other people's opinions are just noise that complicates your ability to see what's actually there. This independence doesn't feel strong. It feels like you're on your own, in a way you didn't choose. You've started noticing how often people trade out of discomfort with waiting. They can't sit in cash. They can't watch the market move without participating. They need to be involved even when there's nothing to do. You used to be like this. You'd find setups that weren't really there because not trading felt like missing out. Now you see the compulsion in others, and you recognize it because you remember how it felt. You don't judge them for it. But you can't participate in it anymore. The thing that used to drive you to trade now looks like the thing that prevents real trading. The longer time frames reveal something the shorter ones hide. They show you that most movement is back and forth. Accumulation and distribution, price testing levels and returning. The big moves are rare, and when they come, they're obvious. Not in the moment, but in retrospect. You can see them building for weeks. The clues were always there. You just weren't looking at the right scale. Now that you're looking at the right scale, you see fewer opportunities. But the opportunities you see are clearer, and this clarity makes the waiting easier because you're not waiting for a feeling. You're waiting for a structure to complete. You used to think that discipline meant forcing yourself to do things you didn't want to do. Following rules even when they felt wrong. Sticking to your plan even when the market seemed to be offering something better. Now you realize that discipline is just the absence of internal conflict. You don't have to force yourself to wait because you're not fighting the urge to trade. You don't have to force yourself to follow your rules because the rules describe what you already see. The effort is gone. And without the effort, it doesn't feel like discipline. It just feels like what you do. Your journal entries are shorter now. You used to write paragraphs analyzing your psychology and your decision-making and your emotional state. Now you write a few sentences about what you saw on the chart and what you did in response. The depth is gone. Not because you're less thoughtful, because there's less internal drama to document. The trading has become straightforward. You saw a thing. You did a thing. It worked or it didn't. There's nothing to analyze. And this simplicity makes you wonder if you're missing something important that more serious traders would be tracking. You're starting to see how much of trading education is designed to keep you busy. The indicators, the multiple time frame analysis, the correlation studies, the economic calendars, all of it gives you something to do, something to learn, something to optimize. But the more you strip away, the clearer the charts become. You're down to price action and structure now, maybe one or two levels that matter. That's it. And with so little to focus on, the process has become almost invisible. You execute trades without thinking about execution. You manage risk without thinking about management. It happens automatically, and automatic feels dangerous, because you were taught that trading requires constant attention and effort. People ask you how trading is going and you don't know how to answer. It's going fine. You're not losing money. You're not making dramatic gains. You're slowly building consistency. But that answer sounds boring. It sounds like you're not really doing anything, so you sometimes don't mention it at all. You let people assume you've stopped or that it didn't work out. Because explaining what trading has become requires explaining that it's not what anyone thinks it is. And you don't have the energy for that conversation. You've stopped trying to catch exact tops and bottoms. You used to feel like you were missing out if you didn't enter at the perfect moment. Now you enter when the structure confirms, and you accept that you'll miss part of the move. You're not trying to maximize every trade. You're trying to participate in valid moves and avoid invalid ones. This approach leaves money on the table. You can see it happening. But chasing perfection always led to worse outcomes. So you've accepted imperfection as the baseline. And accepting imperfection feels like settling even though your results have improved. You're realizing that most traders never see what you're seeing now because they quit before the shift happens. They're still in the phase where trading is emotionally loud, where every decision feels significant, where the wins and losses define their day. They can't imagine a version of trading where all that noise goes away. And because they can't imagine it, they interpret the quiet as boredom or stagnation. They think the excitement is supposed to last forever, that if it fades, it means they've lost their edge. So they leave, and they never find out what comes after the excitement. You used to think that successful traders were the ones who loved trading the most, who were most passionate about it, who thought about it constantly. Now you think successful traders are the ones who stop needing it to be exciting, who can show up every day and do nothing if there's nothing to do, who can execute a trade without it meaning anything about their identity or their skill or their future. The detachment you're feeling isn't a problem, it's the point. But nobody tells you this. They talk about passion and dedication and commitment. They don't talk about the emotional neutrality that makes long-term survival possible. You've started noticing the difference between activity and progress. Activity is opening charts, scanning for setups, entering trades, moving stops, checking positions. Progress is the slowly improving equity curve, the reduction in drawdowns, the consistency in risk management. Activity feels like work. Progress feels like nothing. You can be incredibly active and make no progress. You can make significant progress while doing almost nothing. But the culture around trading celebrates activity. It rewards the appearance of effort. So doing less feels like you're not really participating even when doing less is what finally made progress possible. The doubt you're feeling now is different from the doubt you felt at the beginning. At the beginning, you doubted whether you could learn this, whether you had what it takes, whether you'd ever figure it out. Now you doubt whether you've figured it out, even though the evidence says you have. You're profitable. You're consistent. You're managing risk well. But it doesn't feel the way you thought it would feel. There's no moment of arrival, no clear signal that you've made it, just a gradual shift into a version of trading that looks nothing like what you imagined. And that gap between expectation and reality makes you question whether you're on the right path. You're watching trades develop over days now. You enter a position, and then you don't look at it. Not because you're disciplined, because there's nothing to look at. The trade is working, or it's not. Price is moving toward your target, or it's moving toward your stop. Checking it doesn't change anything. You used to think this kind of detachment required years of experience, some kind of wisdom or maturity you didn't have yet. Now you realize it's just what happens when you stop believing that your attention influences outcomes. The magic thinking fades. And without it, trading becomes a mechanical process. And mechanical feels wrong when you were taught that the best traders have intuition and feel and connection to the market. You've stopped caring about what the market does when you're not in a trade. Price can rip 100 pips in a direction, and if you weren't positioned, it doesn't matter. You used to feel every move. You'd see a big candle and feel like you missed something. Feel like you should have been there. Now you see a big candle and you just observe it. If it creates a new structure, you'll pay attention. If it doesn't, it's just movement. You're not trying to catch everything. You're not even trying to catch most things. You're trying to catch the things that fit your approach. And that narrow focus makes the market feel smaller, less overwhelming, but also less interesting. Your approach has simplified without you trying to simplify it. You're not using fewer tools because you decided to be minimalist. You're using fewer tools because most tools stopped adding information. The chart tells you what you need to know. Price and structure. That's it. Everything else is decoration. And once you see that the decoration is just decoration, you stop paying attention to it. This simplification should make you feel more confident. Instead, it makes you feel like you're missing something. Like real traders use more sophisticated methods. Like your simple approach is a sign that you haven't gone deep enough. You're starting to understand why so few people make it. Not because trading is hard, but because the process of becoming consistent requires you to give up all the things that made trading feel like trading. The excitement, the urgency, the emotional highs and lows, the constant involvement, the sense that every decision matters. You have to let all of that go, and most people can't. They'd rather keep feeling something and lose money than feel nothing and make money. The emotional neutrality required for consistency feels like death. Like you're becoming a robot, like you're losing the part of yourself that made this worthwhile in the first place. You've stopped arguing with the market. You used to hold positions because you believed you were right. You'd watch price move against you, and you'd add to the position because your analysis said it should reverse. You were trading your opinion. Now you're trading price. If price says you're wrong, you're wrong. It doesn't matter what your analysis said. It doesn't matter what should happen. What matters is what is happening. And what is happening is always visible on the chart, if you're willing to see it. This surrender doesn't feel like wisdom. It feels like giving up. Like you've lost your conviction. Like you're not really trading anymore if you're not fighting for your view. The winning trades you remember aren't the ones that made the most money. They're the ones where you followed your process perfectly, where you saw a setup, waited for confirmation, entered at your level, managed the position according to plan, and exited where you planned to exit. The money was almost incidental. What mattered was the execution. And this shift in what you value means you're measuring success differently now. You can have a losing week and feel good about it if you executed well. You can have a winning week and feel uncertain if you deviated from your process. The external results no longer define the quality of your trading. The internal consistency does. And nobody talks about this. You've realized that the hard part isn't learning to trade. The hard part is continuing to trade after it stops being interesting. After the novelty wears off. After you've figured out your approach, and now you just have to repeat it. Day after day, week after week, month after month, with no drama, no breakthroughs, no validation, just the slow accumulation of small edges executed consistently. Most people need their work to feel meaningful in the moment. They need feedback, progress markers, a sense that today mattered. Trading doesn't give you that. Today looks exactly like yesterday, and tomorrow will look exactly like today. And if you can't tolerate that sameness, you'll leave. Not because you're failing, because you can't stand succeeding in something that feels this empty. You're seeing patterns now that you couldn't see before. Not chart patterns, psychological patterns. The way traders sabotage themselves right before they break through. The way they change their approach as soon as it starts working. The way they interpret consistency as stagnation. The way they leave right before the compounding kicks in. You're watching yourself go through this. You can see the urge to change something, to add complexity, to try a new strategy, to prove that you're still learning and growing and improving. But you also know that this urge is the trap, that the people who make it are the ones who resist the urge to do something different, who keep doing the same thing even when it feels boring, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Because nothing happening is what eventually leads to something happening. The loneliness is the part you didn't expect. You thought trading would connect you to a community of people doing the same thing, and in the beginning it did. But now you're in a place where most people aren't. Most people are still in the excitement phase. Or they've already quit. The ones who are where you are don't talk about it much. They don't post. They don't engage. They're just quietly doing their thing. And you're starting to understand why. Because there's nothing to say. The work is repetitive. The insights are internal. The progress is invisible to anyone who isn't looking at your equity curve. So you stop talking about it. And the silence makes you wonder if you're alone in this. If maybe you've misunderstood something fundamental. If the people who are really successful are having a completely different experience that you're not privy to, you've stopped looking for the perfect trade. The one where everything aligns. Where every time frame confirms. Where the risk-reward is 10-1. Where the entry is perfect and the exit is perfect. And the whole thing unfolds exactly as planned. You used to wait for these trades. You'd pass on good setups because they weren't perfect setups. Now you take good setups. You accept that most trades will have some flaw, some compromise, some element that isn't ideal. And those trades work just as often as the perfect ones, maybe more often. Because you're not waiting for conditions that rarely exist. You're working with conditions that are actually present. And this pragmatism feels like you've lowered your standards even though your results have improved. Your relationship with money has changed. You used to think about how much you could make, what your account could grow to, how trading could change your life financially. Now you think about whether you're managing risk properly, whether you're being consistent, whether you're following your process. The money is a byproduct. It's not the point anymore. And this shift happened so gradually that you can't point to when it occurred. You just noticed one day that you stopped checking your account balance obsessively. That you stopped calculating how much you'd have if you kept this up for a year. That the fantasy of what trading could provide has been replaced by the reality of what trading actually is. A process that produces income if you do it correctly, nothing more, nothing less. You're starting to see that the people who talk the most about trading are usually the ones who are struggling the most. The ones who have figured it out don't have much to say. They're not posting their setups. They're not sharing their wins. They're not building brands around their trading success. They're just trading. And their silence used to make you think they didn't exist. That maybe nobody actually figures this out. That everyone who claims to be successful is lying. Now you realize they're just busy doing the thing instead of talking about the thing. And you're becoming one of them. Which means you're disappearing from the spaces where you used to seek validation. And that disappearance feels like isolation, even though it's probably just focus. The biggest shift is realizing that nothing dramatic has to happen for you to become consistent. There's no breakthrough moment, no sudden clarity, no point where everything clicks. You just keep showing up, keep following your process, keep managing your risk, and slowly, imperceptibly, the results stabilize. The equity curve smooths out, the drawdowns shrink. The wins start to outnumber the losses, not by much, but by enough. And this gradual improvement is so undramatic that you keep waiting for the real change to happen. The moment where you finally feel like a real trader, where you finally feel like you've made it. But that moment never comes, because becoming consistent doesn't feel like anything. It's just what's left after everything else falls away.